Dr. Elena Carter stood in the observation room staring at the screen. Her voice was tight with frustration. They've been up there for 3 weeks and we still have nothing. How is that possible? Captain Mark Donovan crossed his arms, his eyes fixed on the same screen displaying the silent alien ships in orbit. Because they refuse to play by our rules, Elena. They don't respond to our signals, our attempts at contact, nothing. Elena turned sharply to face him. Refuse or can't? There's a difference. Mark's jaw tightened. Does it matter? Empty ships or not, those things are sitting right above our heads, and every major power on Earth is one misstep away from firing the first shot. Elena's tone softened, but her urgency didn't fade. We can't afford to assume the worst. What if this is something else? A test? An invitation? Mark raised an eyebrow. An invitation? They've been parked there like ghosts, not even a flicker of movement. What kind of invitation is that? Dr. Yusuf Patel, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up. Perhaps it's neither. Perhaps it's a warning. The room fell silent. Elena frowned, her gaze shifting back to the screen. A warning about what? Yusuf gestured at the fleet, his voice measured. We're assuming they're in control of those ships. What if they're not? Mark scoffed. You're suggesting what? That they're derelicts, abandoned? Yusuf's expression didn't waver. I'm suggesting we don't know enough to rule anything out. Elena nodded slowly. Then we need to find out. Sitting here speculating isn't going to help anyone. Mark sighed heavily. You're talking about boarding one of them, aren't you? Elena's eyes locked onto his. Yes, it's our only option. Yusuf folded his arms. It's also incredibly dangerous. We have no idea what's inside those ships. For all we know, they could be traps. Elena's voice was firm. Or they could hold answers. Answers we desperately need. Mark paced the room, his boots echoing on the floor. Even if I agree, who do we send? Volunteers? A military team? Elena stepped forward, her determination clear. We send the best. People who can think on their feet, adapt to the unknown. Scientists, engineers, and yes, soldiers too. Mark stopped pacing and faced her. You realize if anything goes wrong, it could spark a war we're not ready for. Elena's voice softened, but her resolve didn't waver. And if we do nothing, we risk even more. We can't let fear paralyze us, Mark. After a long pause, Mark nodded reluctantly. All right, but we do this my way, carefully, no unnecessary risks. Elena managed a faint smile. Agreed. Let's assemble the team. The shuttle bay was a hive of activity as the boarding team prepared for their mission. Commander Julia Reyes tightened the straps on her suit, her voice steady as she addressed her team. Listen up. We don't know what we're walking into, so stay sharp. No heroics, no splitting up. We move as one. Dr. Marcus Harlow, the team's lead xenobiologist, adjusted his equipment nervously. Do we even have a plan if we encounter something? Julia shot him a look. We stick to protocol. Observe, report, and retreat if necessary. Survival comes first. Engineer Zoe Kim chimed in, her tone light but her eyes serious. And if the ship decides to eat us? The team chuckled nervously, and Julia allowed a small smile. Then we make sure it gets indigestion. The humor eased the tension, but the weight of the mission was palpable. As the shuttle launched, silence fell over the group, each member lost in their thoughts. When the alien vessel loomed into view, its sheer size and eerie stillness sent a shiver through the team. Zoe whispered under her breath, "It's like a graveyard." Marcus nodded, his voice barely audible. A graveyard for giants. Julia's voice cut through the silence, calm and authoritative. Focus, people. We're here to do a job. As the shuttle docked and the airlock hissed open, the team stepped into the unknown, their lights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The interior of the ship was vast and silent, the walls covered in strange, organic patterns that seemed to pulse faintly. Marcus scanned the area with his equipment, his brow furrowing. I'm picking up faint energy readings, but they're erratic, almost like they're alive. Zoe ran her hand along the wall, her expression wary. It feels warm, like skin. Julia's voice was firm. Stay focused. We need to find the control center. As they moved deeper into the ship, the sense of unease grew. The corridors were eerily empty, yet the faint hum of the ship suggested it was far from lifeless. Suddenly, a low, resonant sound echoed through the halls, stopping the team in their tracks. Marcus's voice trembled. "What was that?" Julia held up a hand, signaling for silence. The sound came again, closer this time. A deep, rhythmic thrum that seemed to vibrate through their very bones. Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's coming from ahead." Julia nodded, her expression grim. "Stay close. We're not turning back now." The team pressed on, their lights cutting through the darkness as the sound grew louder. When they finally reached the source, they found themselves in a massive chamber filled with towering, translucent pods. Inside each pod was a figure, humanoid but distinctly alien, their features obscured by swirling mist. Marcus stared in awe. "They're in stasis, but why?" Zoe's voice was tinged with fear. "More importantly, what happens if they wake up?" Julia's jaw tightened. "We need answers. Marcus, can you analyze their systems?" He nodded, already setting up his equipment. As Marcus worked, the rest of the team kept a wary eye on the pods. The rhythmic thrum seemed to synchronize with the faint pulses of light within the chamber, creating an almost hypnotic effect. Suddenly, Marcus's voice broke the silence. I think I've found something. These pods aren't just keeping them in stasis. They're connected to the ship. It's like the ship is alive and they're its brain." Julia's eyes narrowed. "Then why are they asleep?" Marcus hesitated. "I don't know, but if they wake up, the ship might change." Before anyone could respond, the chamber trembled and the pods began to glow brighter. The team exchanged panicked glances as the rhythmic thrum grew louder, almost deafening. Zoe's voice was frantic. "What's happening?" Marcus's face was pale. "I think we've triggered something." Julia's voice cut through the chaos. "Fall back! Now!" The team scrambled to retreat, their boots echoing against the metallic floor as the chamber pulsed with light and sound. The once dormant ship seemed to awaken around them, walls shifting subtly, as if the entire structure were alive and responding to their presence. Marcus shouted over the noise. "The energy levels are spiking! This whole place is coming online!" Zoe glanced back at the glowing pods, fear etched on her face. "They're waking up! We need to get out of here before they do." Julia led the way, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Keep moving. Don't stop for anything." As they retraced their steps, the corridors seemed to change, twisting and elongating as if the ship were deliberately disorienting them. The rhythmic thrum now felt like a heartbeat, growing faster and louder with each passing second. Marcus gasped as his scanner beeped wildly. "There's something moving ahead of us. Multiple signals." Julia raised her weapon, signaling the team to halt. "Stay sharp. Whatever it is, we don't let it stop us." From the shadows, figures began to emerge. Sleek, humanoid forms with glowing eyes and fluid movements. They didn't attack, but stood blocking the path, their presence unnervingly calm. Zoe muttered under her breath, "They don't look friendly." One of the figures stepped forward, tilting its head as if studying them. When it spoke, the voice was deep and resonant, echoing in their minds rather than their ears. "Why have you disturbed the slumber?" Julia stepped forward cautiously, her weapon lowered but ready. "We mean no harm. We came seeking answers." The figure's glowing eyes seemed to narrow. "Answers are earned, not taken. You have trespassed." Marcus stepped up, his voice trembling but determined. "We didn't know. We're trying to understand who you are and why you're here." The figure's gaze shifted to him, its expression unreadable. "We are the Custodians. This vessel is not for your kind," Zoe whispered to Julia. "Great. Alien bouncers." Julia ignored her, addressing the Custodian directly. "If this ship isn't for us, then why are you in orbit around our planet? Why have you made no contact?" The Custodian's voice grew heavier, laced with an emotion that might have been regret. "We were not meant to be found. Our purpose is incomplete." Marcus frowned. "Incomplete? What does that mean?" Before the Custodian could answer, the ship shuddered violently and the lights dimmed. A new sound filled the air, a high-pitched, discordant wail that set everyone's nerves on edge. The custodian turned sharply, its movements suddenly tense. They are here. Julia's grip on her weapon tightened. Who's here? The custodian's glowing eyes flickered. The ones who hunt. You have led them to us. Zoe's voice rose in panic. Wait, what? Who's hunting you? The custodian didn't answer. Instead, it turned to the other figures and spoke in a language the humans couldn't understand. The figures moved swiftly, disappearing into the shadows. Julia grabbed the custodian's arm. Hey, if there's a threat, we need to know what we're dealing with. The custodian hesitated, then spoke, its voice grim. The Harbingers, they seek to consume all life. This vessel was our refuge, until now. Marcus's face paled. Are you saying we brought them here? That this is our fault? The custodian's gaze was unyielding. You awakened the signal. They followed it. Julia cursed under her breath. All right, then tell us how to stop them. The custodian's voice was cold. There is no stopping them, only survival. The ship trembled again, more violently this time, and the wailing grew louder. Julia turned to her team. We're not dying here. Marcus, Zoe, find a way to shut down that signal. We'll hold them off. The custodian stepped forward. You cannot face the Harbingers alone. Julia met its gaze, her determination unwavering. Then help us. For a moment, the custodian said nothing. Then it nodded. Follow me. There is a way, but it will cost you. As the team followed the custodian deeper into the ship, the walls seemed to pulse with urgency, guiding them toward an unknown destination. The sound of the Harbingers grew closer, a chilling reminder of the danger they faced. Zoe whispered to Marcus, This just keeps getting worse. Marcus managed a grim smile. Welcome to a first contact. The custodian led them to a chamber filled with intricate, glowing machinery. It gestured to a central console. This will sever the signal, but it will also disable the stasis pods. My kind will awaken, and they may not be merciful. Julia stepped forward. We'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now, we need to stop the Harbingers. The custodian hesitated, then placed its hand on the console. The machinery hummed to life, and the lights in the chamber brightened. The rhythmic thrum of the ship began to fade, replaced by a deep, resonant tone. Marcus checked his scanner. The signal's shutting down. It's working. But before they could celebrate, the walls of the chamber began to ripple, and a new sound filled the air, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down their spines. The custodian turned to them, its voice urgent. They are here. Julia raised her weapon, her voice steady. Then let's make sure they regret it. The team braced themselves as the Harbingers descended, shadows twisting into monstrous forms. The battle for survival had begun.